Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you're well. Hope you're having a fantastic day. I just wanted to share this really great interview I had with Tony K. Silver, who is a LinkedIn profiler. So we were able to talk about LinkedIn. We were able to talk about how to get the most out of it, but also, of course, how to create content, what to create content about, and etc. as well in that case as well. So it's a great conversation and a great place to start your LinkedIn journey. So if you'd like to hear more from Tony, I'll link his links in the description down below, and I'll see you very, very soon.
Yeah, hi. Well, my name is Tony K. Silver. The K is quite important. The reason I've got the K in there is that when you Google Tony K. Silver, or you go onto LinkedIn, which is quite pertinent for me, look up Tony K. Silver. Hello, yeah, I'm the only answer, and it makes me exclusive. It was a trick I learnt from a fellow speaker once upon a time, because actually there was a Tony Silver who was involved in an industry I probably wouldn't want to be associated with. So I kind of also distanced myself from them. So yeah, I'm involved in LinkedIn. I have been on the platform since 2006. Kind of 2008, it became quite useful because I lost my job, and I used it to find another one. And then 4 years ago, I'd had enough of the corporate world, saw the light, jumped ship. But I did some planning before I did that. I didn't just decide overnight I was going to be what I am now, although some people do that, and that's something I try and stay clear of. I put some money in the bank, worked with a mentor, and launched my company all around helping people with two things initially, actually. First was networking, because I've been doing that since 2007, 2008. But unfortunately, everyone apparently is very good at networking, so I couldn't help them. Whereas if I walked into a room with people and said, "Hi, I'm a LinkedIn expert," yeah, they're kind of falling over themselves to come and talk to me. So I thought, okay, that's the easy one. Let's go for that. And yeah, my company was then formed, say back in April 2018. So very much almost 4 years old now. Yeah.
And thank you so much for the time, and welcome to the podcast. And for obvious reasons, I think it's going to be a great conversation about LinkedIn. And I think the progression of LinkedIn, I think, is where we should start, because for me, as someone who doesn't specialize specifically in a social platform specifically, but looks to create content across them all, I think it'd be interesting to hear your feedback from a perspective of how video could potentially be used as well. But have you noticed in the last, from what we saw anyway, with LinkedIn specifically, there was this kind of drastic change as the pandemic kind of took hold, where LinkedIn used to be this very corporate facing, very business focused, very kind of make sure your tie's done up straight, make sure you're smiley and that kind of thing. And it was less personalized. It reminds me of what it became anyway, reminds me of early Facebook. Right, in the respect to you get to know people's dogs, you get to know people instead of just their business orientated personality. Right. I mean, how was that change from your perspective? And did you kind of predict that change? Was that something that you thought was going to happen without the pandemic, if the pandemic hadn't happened?
Yeah. Basically, you could have condensed that. LinkedIn was stuffy, and you'd have been spot on. Yeah, it was stuffy. Some of the things that I talk to people about now, I certainly wouldn't have spoken to them about 10 years ago. So the pandemic certainly moved things on, but the actual tipping point was around about 2016, when this little known company in America called Microsoft, you may have heard of them. Yeah, they spent £26.2 billion buying LinkedIn. So yes, those who didn't know, Microsoft owns LinkedIn. They kept on Jeff Weiner, the chairman, but they then decided that they were obviously going to make some changes, and things that Microsoft get involved in means that some of those changes were quite good, quite nice. Many of them weren't. And of course, ever since then, I don't think it's a real word, but they keep trying to Facebook it, and they keep failing miserably, which is good to hear, because it isn't. It's not even social media anymore. It's a professional personal platform with an element of social media in it. But the pandemic certainly accelerated lots of things, and many people then found themselves on LinkedIn. They may have been for years, but they wouldn't actually now having to use it or anything. And I don't know what to do. Let's put out 15 posts a day. And I'm running out of ideas after the second post, so let's post about my dog, my cat, and it got very, very saturated with meaningless drivel to a certain degree. But actually, now that's sort of calmed down, and the pandemic's still with us. It hasn't gone away. For those that haven't seen it on the news for a while, because something else is on the news all the time now, it's still with us. But it calmed down, and a lot of things became not back to normal, because what's normal? I've never understood this term normal. But we see, and I say to people, when I'm training them now, again, this is something I would have said 10 years ago. As long as 7 or 8 out of 10 of the posts that you put out there are business-like, informational, perhaps, maybe discussional. Good idea that, to get some discussions going. Then the other two one can be really salesy. Yeah, you're in business. We kind of understand that. But the other one can be personal. It doesn't matter. We need to know that you're not a robot or a bot, and actually you have got a personality. If you can try and tie it into business with a sort of analogy, then maybe that's quite a good move to do as well. But it's okay to do it. But unlike some lady that did tell me once that she got massive amount of views from a post where she included a picture of her dog, I'm going to put the dog on all my posts from now on. I firmly told her not to. She did, and amazingly, she didn't get the same results, because once it's disruptive, it's quite entertaining. We enjoyed it. Second time, it was boring. And but there was definitely a trend during the pandemic of so many more people becoming active, and then putting out lots and lots of things on LinkedIn just because they thought that throwing lots of mud at a brick wall, some of it might stick. The brick wall's Teflon, by the way, and none of it stuck. So yeah, that was the big issue.
Yeah, and I think the pandemic opened up a window of time, right? So people could experiment with content that they otherwise couldn't, right? Because they were too busy actually running the business and being in the business, etc. But I think it does open up a very interesting world for people who either weren't really looking at creating content consistently, and if they were, how they were actually going about creating that content. Because the pandemic, as I say, gave this window for people to experiment with content. Some did it arguably better than others, but something which I think is across the board is they suddenly realised there needs to be this form of constant kind of ecosystem or things that we're putting out which say something related to what we're trying to sell or to help in that sales process or move people closer to that sales process. I mean, what is the rule of thumb specifically in respect to and obviously don't give everything away, but I think that it'd be valuable for people who are new to LinkedIn to go okay, so should I be posting daily? Should I be posting weekly? Should I be posting as much as I can across a day? What is there a formula?
Yeah. I certainly teach people around how to get the LinkedIn algorithm to work for you rather than against you. So yeah, this is, if those that don't know, LinkedIn algorithm, big technical word, basically it affects what happens to your posts when you post. And it could be something to do with the length of them, what you attach to them, the time of day. There's lots of different things that will actually the list of things that you can do to improve your reach on LinkedIn. So improving your reach means that you're going to get it going out to more people than you actually would standard. It's a bit short, to be honest with you. Whereas the list of things to avoid is quite long. But again, you can't Google this and find out what it is. So I teach my 2 to 3 posts a week is probably fine, because for a lot of people, they are spending too much time on LinkedIn and they're not getting the rewards. I say, well, actually, don't try and post as much as you do. Go for quality, but also consistency. So 2 or 3 posts a week is absolutely fine. You can, if you've got good content, you can post once a day. But as soon as you start posting twice a day, then the LinkedIn algorithm wakes up and goes, oh, wait a second, we don't like this. And it actually will hamper. So I advise people, don't overpost. And of course, lots of people were doing that during the pandemic. They were putting lots of stuff out there. But if it's 2 or 3 posts a week, and the 2 words I use, I don't even know if they're English, to be honest with you, but I don't really care, is discussional and informational. Those are the sort of posts that if you keep the main body of what you do around that, then those are the ones that are going to get the word that LinkedIn's really all about, and that's engagement. And as long as you do that, then when you put out posts, people have opinions. And boy, do they like voicing them. give them the opportunity to, because actually that works for me. And even if they don't have the same opinion as you, that's actually quite good as well. So making a post last for 2 or 3 days is actually a good thing. And therefore, I say to people, if you set yourself a goal of 2 or 3 posts a week, you're not putting too much stress on yourself trying to think of things. But also, when you've got that bit of time, go and get yourself a post vault. Of course, you'll know exactly what that is. Some of the listeners might not. And really, it's a collection of works which you keep on a file on your desktop, which you can dip into from time to time. So I take a couple of days a month where I might spend 2 hours just creating content. Not using it that day, I'll put it into the vault, and then I can go and access it and then get it out there. I haven't got to always think. I mean, the best posts probably are the ones I think of on the day because they're pertinent to what's going on. But also, once you've got that vault, do you think people can remember what you posted 3 months ago? No, they can't. So you can then regurgitate. You might want to change a little bit of it, but actually sometimes you don't even have to do that. So you haven't got to make 2 or 3 posts a week times 52 weeks. That's 160, 170 posts I've got to do, Tony. Oh, that's a bit frightening. No, you don't have to. It's ideal if you do, but you can regurgitate stuff. So 2 or 3 posts a week for most people is absolutely fine.
Yeah, and I think it's an important point, and I'm glad you mentioned the concept of vaulting content, because as you'll know, and we do it a lot, where we'll create a batch of content, right? Like these podcasts are something which I batch record deliberately, so that I know now for the next 2 months I don't need to book any episodes in because I've pre-recorded a bunch. And the only issue where that runs in is if you're talking about very specific topics in the respect to like something that's very time orientated. So if you're talking about something that just happened or etc. But if it's more general advice or more general things that are likely to be the same in 2, 3, 4, 5 months, etc. And especially it's around the topics that you're going to discuss anyway. So me discussing video, you discussing LinkedIn, for example, you can do that. And I think it's really important that you also mentioned, because some of our clients really run into the concept of, oh, we've talked about that, or, oh, we've done that, but can you reframe it? Can you slightly tweak what you're saying so it is given the illusion of it's a brand new piece of content, but actually you're saying the same point again? But also, social media moves really quickly, right? This is something that everyone in general, like it's not just LinkedIn, but especially with TikTok platforms, short form video content that I'm sure we'll get onto as well, especially with those short form video platforms that are infinitely designed to be infinitely scrolling. The amount of consumption in a short period of time is huge. So most people are going to forget, or they're not going to necessarily see the whole value and not necessarily have seen every bit of content you put out from an algorithmic point of view, but also if they don't binge watch as well, they're not going to like to consume all of the content at once. So it's about putting the same messaging across multiple pieces of content so you can get your point heard. And I think that it's important because a lot of our audience are people who are looking to start maybe creating content on their phone through video, or, maybe they're looking to get someone like me to come in and do video for them. What are the things that LinkedIn likes or doesn't like in the respect of video? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions especially around video, from an algorithm point of view, but also in general, around it has to be X or Y.
Videos is something I would talk to all my clients about doing. Okay, so it's one of the things where you can increase your reach. There's 3 stages how you can increase your reach as standard without using any of the magic that I teach. One is to add images to your posts. That gives you a certain increase in your reach. The next step is to put out video, and I strongly suggest that you do consider doing video on a consistent basis. But then you need to consider that damn algorithm again, and what is it going to do? Well, what it's going to do is if you make a video that's over 2 minutes long, it's going to start to eat away at your reach. And by the time it gets 10 minutes, you've got 2 cats and a dog watching, because everyone else has either fallen asleep or the reach has not let them see it in the first place. But then there's also another inherent problem on LinkedIn, and you see it going through your feed. You'll see someone talking on a video looking like this. Yet you can't hear what they say, because by default, LinkedIn will mute that damn video. Now, I say to people, I'm not relying on people going in and moving the slider up and listening to it. I'm going to use subtitles. And I, again, strongly suggest that people look into subtitle software, because A lot of people won't be able to. If we're out and about at a live meeting, you don't want the person whose phone starts blaring out because you're watching a video. So put subtitles on there, and it really it enhances it. Also, a bit of branding. I've just started doing a bit of branding on mine, so I got a couple of intro slides which change, and then an outro slide about my contact detail, just to get some sort of familiarity. They're all starting to look the same formats, but the content in there is all different. But they will definitely, unless I particularly choose not to, they will always have subtitles in there. Otherwise, you could actually just lose the impact completely because people can't be bothered to move that slider up.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And something we did an interesting experiment a couple of years ago, and it was, we produced the same pieces of video, like we made 3 videos, we posted across different periods of time, right? So we took 1 month and we posted the same 3 videos at the start of the month that didn't have subtitles, and then we did the same thing a month later, but the same videos with subtitles. And we wanted to see the difference between the reach and the engagement on those videos, and we wanted to see is the watch time higher across the board when it comes to LinkedIn especially, but in just the other platforms. This is true across, maybe not YouTube is the only one where it's slightly different, but especially on LinkedIn, etc., things like that, having subtitles can allow people to, if they're looking at something when it's not in a social environment where it's acceptable to have that music playing out, maybe they don't have headphones, maybe they don't have that audio, they don't want to have that audio experience, or they don't need to have that audio experience, you can still teach someone and you can still talk to someone directly through those subtitles, which I think is important. It does add some stuff to the workflow, but to be honest, there's so much pieces of software, as you mentioned, that can help with that process. And, they're not perfect though, right? The software is not perfect by any means. So you do need to still go through and check. And I'm glad you mentioned about intro and outro slides, because something which we teach and something which we talk about a lot is building a plan within your video. So building a structure within that video. So the first 5 seconds of a video, and you'll know this as well, is the most important part of that video. So because it's why we call it the hook, because you have to hook your audience into that piece of content, because you have to catch them and stop them scrolling on LinkedIn, for example, or keep it LinkedIn relevant, right? So you're scrolling down LinkedIn and I've got a video. I have to instantly hook you on what I'm talking about, or be different, or connect instantly with my face, or etc. before. And this is one of the things where I would be careful if you are going to do intro slides specifically to yourself, but also in general to people listening, because sometimes if they're too generic and too brand pushy, then people will just go, I don't care, and they'll continue scrolling past, and then they're never going to see, not necessarily going to be likely to see the content. But the key there is you can add the most engaging part in the front end, then introduce a bit of branding. So for example, we use our intro, and then go into the bulk of the content where you actually deliver what it is you're trying to teach or explain. And then I definitely think there should always be a call to action on the end, if that's the point of the video, right? Like, because as we mentioned as well, not every video should necessarily have a call to action on the end, because sometimes you're not necessarily wanting someone to do something necessarily outside of, you just wanted them to give you that piece of information and then carry on with their day. But also at times you want them to watch another video. Also, you want them to maybe book a consulting call with you, or join your webinar, or whatever it may be. There's lots of things that it could be. Or maybe even buy your product, right? So if it's a big promotional video, come to the shop, redeem this code, etc. Things like that can be really strong call to actions. And I think understanding that formula across video can be really important. And the same is true when you do written content, the same is true when you do any form of content as well, having a hook and then building in, because you have to hook your audience. Because the reality of the fact is, we're in a moment where there's so much content being posted on a daily basis. There's so much content out there. I mean, in your experience, because in my experience, I've definitely seen a rise in the amount of organic content that's being created, like full stop, across the board, right? Back when I started, wasn't really a thing 5 years ago. Right? It was there in regards to people were talking about it, and some of the bigger brands were doing it and people were starting to do it, but it wasn't as widespread as the amount of, say, short form content, or especially short form, but also just in general creating as much content as most people I'm seeing should. I mean, have you seen a rise in that in your experience across LinkedIn?
Yeah, but again, I say to them, it's about getting consistency across what you're doing. If you're posting a video, it's a good idea to do it at 10 o'clock every Thursday morning and get people used to the time slot that you do it in. But also, yeah, it needs to be engaging, because like it or not, and I don't like it, the attention span is just disappearing up its own intake. And if you ever see me around, I often bang on about 7-second syndrome, which is a fragrant lie. If I could get them to spend 7 seconds attention wise, I'd be really happy. It's more like 5 or less than that, which means that, as you say, you've got to get a hook in really quickly as to why are they going to stop in their feed and actually pay attention to it. But that's about any part of LinkedIn and any sort of social media as well. But they're not going to spend an awful lot of time. Websites, everything. The 7-second syndrome. It's an epidemic. It's getting to the point where we actually forget things before we actually know them. It's getting really, really weird. But yeah, if you don't get that right at the start, or you just meander into it, then funny enough, people would have left a long time ago. So the 2 seconds. So actually, on LinkedIn, there's a 2 second. 2 minute. Once you go over 2 minutes, they start reducing your reach. I always say, well, actually, are they still going to be watching it at that point as well? So mine tend to straddle the 1 minute. Most of my content, whether it's read or it's video, tends to straddle the 1 minute mark, either just over or just just below it, because I just know that people's attention spans are. So it needs to have a hook. It needs to be worthwhile, even spending a minute listening to it. And with video, yes. You're the expert on that. There's so many different ways of doing it. Mine, mainly for what I do, a lot of it's informational. I'm giving out information to people, the latest trends, etc. But I also deliberately get discussions going. I might be provocative on purpose, maybe. But it's all about getting that engagement, getting people interested in what you're actually doing. So you can, I don't actually think this is a great idea, but when you've got some stuff that's pretty generic, people say to me, I use a scheduling tool. I go, oh, do you? I said, why have you said that? I said, well, because there's two things. First of all, actually, when you join LinkedIn, and you didn't do this, I didn't do this, and I never met anyone who had did it, they read the user agreement when they first joined before they ticked the box. No, they did not. They ticked the box, but in there it says that you shall not use third-party software in conjunction with LinkedIn. So guess what? Hootsuite and buffers as well, they're third-party software. LinkedIn aren't getting overly vicious about it, but they immediately slap a reduction in reach when they notice that the third-party software is being used to deliver that content. So you're already on the back foot before you start. So again, if it's for generic stuff, that doesn't really matter, fine. But if it's content should be of follow-up to most of it of the moment. It should be relevant to what we've seen in the last few days, because social media and LinkedIn move so damn quickly that there are things continually being tweaked and changed that you can.
Yeah, and that can work against you, but also for you, right? Like we've seen viral content happen, and there's no science behind it, right? You'll have a unicorn video. We call it a unicorn video because it's random, right? And TikTok is known for this, right? It's the rise of TikTok is why a lot of the virality happens. But in reality, what's actually happening, and how do you predict, or how do you get yourself so you could have a viral video? In my perspective, create more content that gives you more of a chance for each video to then potentially go viral. Also, there is some social stuff that you can do, like help start a conversation, as you mentioned, that's going to help push that video in the correct direction. Like, for example, the first episodes of announcing the new guest on the podcast, right? We do normally 2 or 3 posts related to the podcast conversation, but the first one is always the one that gets the most traction because I'm introducing, this week I had X or Y on the podcast because it's starting a conversation. So it's actually saying to their network and my network, hey, by the way, me and this person had a great conversation about XYZ, whatever that may be. I think one of the common issues as well, or one of the common questions, which I definitely had at the start of LinkedIn, but I know for a fact that some listeners potentially would have as well, is what role or how important are hashtags in use case for LinkedIn nowadays? Because for me, I've seen a really interesting thing where I've seen it kind of as a SEO trend as well. Like back in the day, you used to be able to keyword stuff a lot of blogs before Google cracked down on it, right? In early days of social media, you used to be able to do the same thing, where you used to be able to hashtag stuff, right? So hashtag stuff your content full of the hashtags you cared about. I don't know the answer to this question. That's part of the reason why I'm asking it, but I have a suspicion it's probably similar now on LinkedIn, right? You can't just go, I'm going to copy and paste a huge amount of hashtags and then it's going to magically make things magic happen for me.
Again, LinkedIn are playing a catch up on hashtags because obviously it is a very social media type thing. The indications from the reports I'm getting, which are consistent, is that LinkedIn likes hashtags, but it doesn't like that many. So if you're using hashtags on LinkedIn, the advice I would strongly say is use between 3 and 5, because once you go over 5 or you don't get to 3, you get a reduction in reach. It doesn't reach as many people. And then if you have gone into creator mode on LinkedIn, if you know what creator mode is, if you don't worry about it. It didn't work. But if you have, you set up, when you first set up creator mode, you set up 5 hashtags. It sits at the top of your profile and it says something stupid like talks about. Well, I'm a professional speaker. I talk about things. Most of you aren't. So it's kind of Americanisms. But I'd say choose those 5 hashtags wisely. But also, and I use 2 in every single post I do. 2 of the 3 that I do will be 2 of those hashtags from there. LinkedIn like that. They spot it and they will give you the kudos for that. But I don't personally follow hashtags, as in I know people go to sites and etc. But if you're using hashtags on LinkedIn, it's a bit like tagging on LinkedIn. People get carried away. You go to an event and every man and their dog's been tagged into it. The algorithm doesn't like it, so don't do it. It's not worthwhile. And same with hashtags. 3 to 5, fine, no problems at all. And if you could use 2 consistently that you're associated with, own your own hashtag, then great, super duper. By the way, I'm on a LinkedIn profile, I'm a LinkedIn expert, and I have got some work out of one of those hashtags because someone looked up on it and I was obviously registered on there. So it's definitely, again, the word consistency came in there, didn't it?
Yeah, and I really relate to that because, we've had some interesting connections from me using hashtag video or hashtag video marketing, for example. There are 2 key ones. And, a lot of people sometimes struggle to understand what the cores are. But I think also the main thing, and what I'm hearing a lot more of from people who, specialize in just TikTok or just LinkedIn or just Instagram or just Facebook, etc., is the golden rules are still the same. Your content needs to be good. Your content needs to be valuable. That's the only thing that's going to get you seen. That's it. If you want to follow one thing from this podcast, or you want to take anything from this conversation, that's the thing. Content is king, distribution is queen, right? They're the 2 things. But if you distribute rubbish, it's still not going to happen. So that's why content's first. And we can get into that and we can get into this, but that's why I'm always very focused when I have a conversation with someone or when I create a piece of content. How is it valuable to the person watching, right? Because yes, I'm asking for their time, but what am I giving them in response? Because that's actually a more valuable resource than them paying me money, arguably. Because everyone has, no matter whether you earn £100 a day or 10,000 or £100,000 a day, you still only have the same amount of time, quote unquote, right? So what am I doing to gain the attention, right? Now, rule of marketing 101, attention is what you want because money follows attention, right? Anyone who's been in marketing long enough will understand that. And it's similar true when it comes to networking, but there's other levels underneath that which are important to understand, and that's where the content comes in, that's where the content conversation comes in, that's where adding value comes in. But I think sometimes people just assume that they're going to add value just because they're creating content, right? Because they're putting something out into the world. I mean, what advice would you give to people to really help them understand what is and isn't good content? Because it can be so subjective, surely.
Don't just put content out there because you think you've got to. You're quite right, because bad content will actually work against you. That might be the piece of content that someone reads and they associate that with you, and the damage is done. Where it's the same with other things around content, and newsletters being one on LinkedIn. That was the story behind that is quite amusing. So newsletters and LinkedIn, probably I started seeing them 9 months ago. No, none of us of you did because it was being beta tested, and they looked as though the format was quite good. I like the template; it seemed to work quite well. So, some of my coaching buddies around the world were trying it out, beta testing it, and I was getting to see it, etc. But I wasn't one of those, so I was on the receiving end. And then LinkedIn just made it very, very, very easy for everybody to have a newsletter. They actually killed it in one foul sweep by saying, actually, can you breathe? Oh, you can have a LinkedIn newsletter in that case. And it wasn't, I mean, I'm taking the mickey there, but it wasn't much more than that. And it meant that people had access to this template that they could start, and they were getting over ambitious. And, there are, you can put it out once a week, once a month, once a quarter, whatever it is, and you choose it. And of course, people are getting carried away. They run out of content really quickly, and then they stopped putting them out. So the consistency went out of the door. And I even say that some of the ones that my fellow LinkedIn trainers have been doing it for months, I could see that they were getting a bit thin on ideas as well. So just giving someone something to do. So I always said right at the beginning that if I do go down the route of doing a LinkedIn newsletter, it's going to be quarterly, because it has to be of value to the reader. I don't want to be putting any fillers in there whatsoever. As yet, I haven't committed to doing it, as I say, because I got so many subscription requests. Because again, there's a box you can check where it says, ask all your connections to subscribe. Oh, great idea that wasn't. That I had so many requests, I was delete. There might have been some really good content in there. I have no idea. I got so fed up seeing them. So yeah, consistency around that is crucial. But yeah, don't put out content, whatever it is, whether it's a post, whether it's an article. If you've got nothing worthwhile saying, it's not worth it. But having a vault certainly will help you, because you're going to have content in there. People get a little panicky over it, and I say, well, yeah, I like to see consistency, but don't do it. If you really haven't got anything to say, then it's probably better to say nothing, because that could be the one that someone reads and goes, cool, Bennett, that's a lot of rubbish. I don't want to bother following this person putting out rubbish. Yeah, make it valuable. So, and also, yeah, that means you've got to identify your audience and know what your audience is looking for. You need to know your demographics, your avatars, and all that. Just because you think it's valuable doesn't necessarily mean it is going to be. So yeah,
I think there's
don't let your ego drive it. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. I think there's 2 points there. I mean, the first is something that I've had for a while, which is don't post on social just because you are obligated to post on social, right? Which is exactly what you were just talking about. But also, when it comes to content creation, people ask me where do I get my ideas from? How do I create as much content as we do? And I have multiple strategies and multiple ways to do this, but the simplest one that is teachable is document, don't create. Now, Gary prioritized this and has really pushed it to the forefront. Now, those who don't know Gary Vaynerchuk, he's a large marketer. He's made a very good name for himself across all of the social media platforms, and he runs a very good marketing agency. But the key there is you don't have to think about content if you're filming, documenting, writing notes, creating content around your day-to-day, because your day-to-day will happen just by you getting up, right? So you're not in this position where you're like, oh my God, I have to think of a social media post. Because the best case scenario is you actually have too much content and there's another bottleneck. For example, for us, we have too much content. The bottleneck is the editing time it takes for me to polish it. That's the bottleneck. That's the only bottleneck on how much content we could potentially put out into the world. It's not because none of it's valuable. It's not because there isn't value there. Some of the content we have to underutilize so we can get it out, and then we can get some new stuff out, right? Because there's even stuff you can do with long form pieces like this, which I'm sure we can get into, but there's so much you can do once you have an ecosystem of content that's being created that will mean you'll never run out of content. But you need to be able to pick or have an editor or have someone who can help you. And if you don't have this skill set, ask. There's people who make a living and know how to do it very well to pick out those chunks from your day, right? Pick out those things from you. Have an inspiring conversation that then gives you those little golden nuggets of things you can create content about that then you can batch record. So then you can be in a position where you've got a big vault of content that you can then post. And I'm not just meaning this in video. I can talk from a video perspective because it's where my brain automatically goes. But you can do it in written, you can do it in audio, you can do it in any medium in which you feel is necessary. I mean, something that, just as you were talking a moment ago, that jumped to mind to me, which I I don't know as well, as I think a lot of people don't necessarily on LinkedIn. And what I'm trying to do here is ask a lot of commonly asked questions that I think the audience are going to have. And what specifically is the difference between a personal account, so an account, so my profile, for example, and then a business's profile? And is there a pro and con to both? Or should you be having a business profile posting to that more? Should you be posting to your own person? Unwind that a little bit, because I think that's something that a lot of people sometimes misunderstand or sometimes don't, and I personally don't really get either.
I'm just going to jump back into what you were saying prior to that, and that I'm doing this podcast because this is professionally produced. Okay, I get invited to do lots of podcasts. I quite often say no. Now, I did one with a lady where I was being interviewed by two of them, and as an output from that, I got probably 20 pieces that I can use. Some were audio clips, some were video clips, and then so you can actually, if you say, one piece of material can be used in various different ways. I've written a book. That's a massive amount of content that I could parcel up into various different ways. Going back to the question you asked about the difference between the company and the personal. Now, let me make it very clear. This was set up back in 2003 by 5 guys in America in the HR space, but it has evolved into being a professional personal profile. Now, the important word there was the word personal, because the company page was a bit of an afterthought, if I'm really being honest with you. They have improved it. They have made it a lot better than it used to be. And actually, for some people, you don't need a website. Actually, what we can do is we can build a company page that acts like a little microsite for you. But then you need to understand the one real thing, and that is that when you post from your personal page and when you post from your company page, there are massive differences. First of all, I pretty much guarantee that most people's personal profile will have more connections than their company page will have followers. Okay, pretty much, yeah, it's a pretty safe bet. And then when you also look at the next thing, which is when you post from your personal page, the initial batch they send out for analysis in that golden 2 hours is 10%. So if you've got 1,000 connections, 10%, that's 100 people. Now, I pretty much guarantee someone with 1,000 connections, the company page has got a couple hundred followers if they're lucky. That gets a 3%. So 3% of 200 is you get 6. So you can immediately see where the problems are here. So there needs to be some joined up thinking when companies do actually put a company page up, that they have to engage through the personal profiles. Because ultimately, what are people going to company pages for? Mainly to find out who works there, to go and look at their personal profiles. So an awful lot of time spent around putting out output from the company page is great if you are a large company and you've got tens of thousands of followers, because yes, you're still getting a fair amount of impact. But even if you're smaller, you need to do the joined up thinking about, right, well, that company page is going to post, I need to share it, I need to get engaged through the personal profile, because that's probably where most of the engagement's going to come. So yeah, when I work with people, I often sort of say, well, yeah, I can work on your company page, but it's not going to take an awful long time to do it, because I want to spend the time where it's going to be most effective, which is the personal side of things. And actually, some people just want that logo pulled through from their company page to sit up at the top of their personal profile. I mean, I had that yesterday of someone. I said, well, until you put it on your company page, it won't pull through. Yeah, so company pages, nice idea in theory. If you're big enough, then they can work quite well. But for most people, it's a bit of a struggle to get any real impact from them.
Interesting. Because I think, yeah, as I say, and that's why I asked it, because I think so many people, they get overwhelmed at the concept of doing social anyway. Never mind within LinkedIn's bubble on its own, we've got this page, then we've got personal accounts, then we've got hashtags, then we've got this, then we've got this, then we've got this. So, for me, I think it's really great to streamline what you're doing. And that's why I've always been like, what's the benefit of having for me, because that's what I possibly wrongly assumed, but that's what I assumed. Because I was like, I understand it makes sense to link all your employees together and all that kind of thing. I get that. But from a really content distribution point of view, I don't see how it makes a lot of sense. And it kind of builds onto my one of my final questions, or my next question, because there's so many new things that LinkedIn's trying, and this is not new to LinkedIn. This is a social media trend thing, right? Where they see something work. I'll use TikTok as an example, right? TikTok exploded because of short form video and endlessly scrolling feeds. Okay, so then YouTube saw that, LinkedIn saw that, Instagram saw that, and went, there's market here, there's attention here, we need to try and emulate something relevant. What jumps to mind was when stories was really popular. Snapchat started with stories. Instagram then jumped and actually kind of took that market, in my opinion. LinkedIn tried it, magically disappeared because no one migrated over, right? So they pulled it. But something which I think is really interesting that I've seen is there's been this kind of new thing of live streaming on LinkedIn, right? And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on what the benefits are or what the cons are of doing it, because I've had lots of conversations and I always ask people, well, why? I get the appeal of live, but if you're a smaller creator and you don't have loads of people throwing in questions, being part of the conversation, why are you doing it live? Because it becomes harder. Everything becomes harder the second it's live, right? So, for example, if my phone goes off or your phone goes off or something isn't perfect, I can fix that after the fact in the edit, right? Because I can cut that slight pause out. If it's live, I can't do that. Or it's easier for me to add stuff over the top if we're talking about a specific topic and I want to add more visual interest. I can do that a lot easier because I'm editing it. This is going through a post-edit process, right? I can also tweak the audio. I can also do lots of other things that are harder to do. You can do all of these things live. Everything I just discussed, you can do live. But it becomes harder because you need to have someone else doing it while you're presenting. Or someone else, or you doing it, but then you're not being as full on the conversation and not focused on just the presentation aspect. And that's personally why I prefer pre-recorded stuff. But leading back to the question, I mean, is there a huge benefit, or would you recommend people do lives? Like, is there a big, tick box, LinkedIn's like, do lives?
Well, LinkedIn Live used to be one of these mystical beasts, and I've never had it clarified exactly, but you used to have a certain amount of followers, and I think the number was set at like a 10,000. So if you applied for LinkedIn Live prior to about middle of last year, then you had to have all the credentials. You had to have a big following to actually give you the facility, etc. So a lot of people weren't getting through. They weren't, they'd applied for it and they were getting nowhere. And then part of creator mode meant that once you had creator mode switched on, you could then apply for LinkedIn Live, and you had to have 150 followers. Like, who hasn't? So again, they made it open to the masses, and of course the masses found out about it, and the masses decided that they would apply. They get it. Some people got it back the same day, and other people who waited years literally to get it. And then what are we going to do with it? Well, we've got this facility now, and I chose StreamYard as my one that I was going to use. And then I started seeing that everyone was going LinkedIn Lives, and I went on a couple just to see what they were like. And you're right. Some of the reports show that the engagement level is about 3%. It's forget about all the technical issues you've just spoken about. Where's the audience? And a lot of the LinkedIn Live engagement came out not on the live part of it, when it was regurgitated as such. Very few people were watching lives, far less than people thought that were going to happen. And then, certainly on StreamYard, and I don't know about the other ones, but, you had people asking questions and all that. And you realize that, again, that those three dogs and that cat and what we're watching, and all the human beings were doing other things. But there is a life after it, as I say. There does seem to be on LinkedIn Live. Yes, it's broadcast live, etc., but you can then rebroadcast it, etc. And I think that's where it gets most of its engagement. So it's something to have a look at, but don't expect to get a massive, great big audience unless you're Gary Vaynerchuk or someone like that, because you're not. and therefore you could be. So we could have done this as a LinkedIn Live. We could have put it on one of those things like such as StreamYard, and we could have run it that way. But yeah, I seriously think that the reports I've seen show that the engagement levels are just really pathetic. But it's worth experimenting. But again, only worth experimenting with, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got something to say. Don't just do it because you can.
Yeah, and one of the key things I always say about people who ask me about live streaming video is if you're going to open your live stream and then say, we're just going to wait for some people to join, don't press live. Do not press that button, because you're just going to waste your time. No one else's, just yours. And the point I'm making is if most, and that's why I'm glad to hear that it's mostly rewatched stuff, because then my argument makes complete sense. Because if it's mainly going to get its traction from a rebroadcast or a playback of a live stream, there's no benefit of doing it live. There's absolutely no benefit, because you take away all of the control you can have when you edit it, or all of the bells and whistles you can add on it, or all the color grading you can do, and all the sound work you can do, and etc. Which you can do, as I say, which you can do all of that live if you have the money, the technical understanding, and the resources to do so, right? And the only benefit I can see, and I've asked people, and we all come to the same conclusion, is if you have a large enough following where you're going to have consistently people in the chat, and you can build. There's two ways to look at it. Either you have a big enough following already where you go live and there's enough of intrigue to have a live conversation with you, where people are going to ask stuff in the chat and they want to hear that feedback straight away, like a Q&A in a talk at the end of a talk, for example. Or you are so consistent with the concept of doing a live every Friday at 12. I'm going to do a live, and I do that for years. At that point, when you've done it for 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, at that point, you will have people who expect and have built routine around the fact you do that live stream about that topic, about that valuable subject, at Friday at 12 o'clock on LinkedIn, right? So they're the two approaches you need to choose. Either you're willing to create valuable content that you could do pre-production on, and you're willing to do that live with the potential goal, and there's no guarantee you're going to get this even if you do it for 3 years, by the way, but that you could get that if you do it for 3 years, with then the likelihood, and there's lots of benefits of doing it long form, because then you can still download the VOD and cut it up, as we say with long form. But again, I always lean into having the control that you gain with doing stuff like this, where you pre-record it, you have the option to do it again if the guest or you are not happy, and completely re-record the episode if you want to, and you're not then stuck into, I've guaranteed there's going to be a live stream, and we're going to have this person, and we're going to talk about this. It's about choosing what's going to work for you. Personally, I don't think it would work for me, and I don't personally think it's worth the hassle unless you have a large production team to do the back-end stuff for you. So you can focus on whether that's outsourced to something like us, or you are bringing them internally into your business and you're doing it as consistently part of your show and part of your marketing, and you have the justificationable cash flow to do that, and you also are planning to reuse that live stream afterwards in respect to clips and other marketing stuff, I'm sure we can get into at a later date, but I'm conscious of time, so let's wrap up soon. But something I like to do at the end as well is to give you an opportunity to ask me a direct question or throw in a topic for us to discuss if you have one, to just end off the episode. So do you have something?
Yeah, what are your feelings on that subject of subtitles? Because some people sort of poo-poo it when I say it, but I'm sold on the idea, and also actually, let's not discount the poor old deaf people who can't hear you anyway, because LinkedIn is a good medium for them, because it's very visual with lots of words on a page. They can engage with it, but if and they're missing out as well. But also, the subtitle software I use, it converts it pretty much simultaneously. It's not gone off to some guy in a little black box who then sits and types out what he heard and sends it back to you 24 hours later. It's actually pretty, and it's 95% accurate with my voice. So it takes me 5 minutes from uploading the video to downloading it, and that's done, dusted, subtitled. And I just think it looks and feels better. But you're the video guy. Am I just doing it because I like doing it.
You're definitely right, and there's definitely a huge benefit. And as I said a little bit earlier when we first mentioned it, the only platform where I would say it's not as valuable is YouTube. And the reason why is very simple, because when people go to consume stuff on YouTube, they are looking to have a long session time, e.g. the time they're going to spend consuming video content, and they are in a reality or in a world where they're more likely to be open to the idea of using audio, right? So the thing is we have on social is it's actually the opposite. The majority of the time, it's like you wouldn't go to like when you're looking to watch a box set or you're looking to watch something that's a cinema-based piece of content, you're more likely to then be like going to a cinema to do that or going to your settee to do that, right? That's how we should see YouTube, right? Social media is, I have 5 minutes, I'm waiting to get a coffee and I'm scrolling because I have nothing else to do and I want to be entertained. That's how we need to look at social. And the reason why subtitles in answer to the question is really powerful there is because in that scenario, unless you have earphones in, you're not going to want to blast that, or it's socially not acceptable for you to blast that audio out, because outside of you, no one else is going to be interested in, well, potentially there might be someone, but in most cases, you're going to be the only person who's interested in that piece of content. So having subtitles allows people to consume and be taught by you and be educated by you in the times where they're actually going to be having the attention on LinkedIn, having the attention on Instagram, having the attention on TikTok, right? That doesn't mean you don't, because you've still got the audio there. So it might actually be, and something we've noticed with clients as well, is we have subtitles throughout the video, but the subtitles are actually there to get people to unmute the video, so they can actually hear the person talking or hear the people having the conversation when they're in an environment that it is more socially acceptable to do that. So I think it just depends on where you're putting the content. I mean, the same is true how, from a format perspective, is it portrait? Why is it portrait? Is it landscape? How is it landscape? Right? I mean, we could have an entire separate conversation just about how do you format a video, right? To optimize it to the algorithm or optimize it in general. And perhaps we should. But I think for initially, that was kind of everything I wanted to discuss today. But if people are interested in potentially, hearing more about your training, hearing about the book, continuing this conversation outside of this medium of content, how's best for people to do that?
Rewind right to the beginning of this, and I gave you the big hint that I can't be bothered to remember URLs and all that. Yeah, my name is Tony K. Silver. If you put that into LinkedIn, you're gonna find me. It's very easy, and that's the best place. Don't go bother looking for my website, etc., because I'm rebranding that in line with the fact everyone knows me as Tony K. Silver, not my company. Tony K. Silver on LinkedIn. Or you Google Tony K. Silver, you're still going to get a lot of my content as well as my LinkedIn profile. So yeah.
Thank you for joining me, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this episode. If you did, I'd love to hear what you think in the comment section down below. If you're new and you enjoyed this piece of content, why not be subscribed? And I'll see you very, very soon.